Hi, it's Patsy Thompson, and Ernie and I have spent the day having fun in my sewing room again, and we've got a new video tutorial for you, and it involves the quilt back here. It's not bound yet, but I just made this today. I'm not wild about the background quilting, but it was really fun to make, and I thought it would be fun to show some techniques that you can use to just add a little bit of interest. I'm not sure the camera picks it up, but the first thing that we did that I'll show you how to do is to burn the edges. These ginkgo leaves are made of silk, and the edges have been burned, and so they have a nice singed edge to them. The next thing that we did was we added some color to the fabric. You can see here on this one it's got some warm highlights with reds and browns, and we've got some reds on the green. Did that with colored pencils, and I'll show you how to do that. Then we fused the whole thing to the background fabric, and then went in and did free motion machine embroidery on the ginkgo leaves. They protrude out a little bit, which is not real easily seen here, but it's a nice way to make important features of your quilt more prominent. So I'll show you how to do that. And then once all the machine embroidery was done, we went back in and made it into a quilt sandwich and quilted it. So let's go ahead and meet outside, because that's where we need to be to burn our silk. The first thing we're going to be doing to jazz up our applique is we're going to burn the edges of our silk applique. So to start off, you're going to need to have fused your silk applique to some type of fusible web. I used Wonder Under, and you want to cut it out into its final shape so it'll look like this. We're doing giant ginkgo leaves. You can do this on small pieces as well. What we'll be going for is basically a singeing all along the edge. And as we do this, you're going to see that you can also create some neat textures. In places the silk will kind of curl up, in places it will fold over, and it will give you an applique that's a little bit more interesting. You can also burn holes in the body of the applique. I don't think I'm going to do that for this, but there's a lot of different things you can do when you're burning silk. Now to do this, you're going to need some type of burning tool. I'm using what's called a creative textile tool. These are available in most craft stores. It'll come in a box like this, and when you open it up, you'll see it comes with a variety of different tips that fit on the end. I'm using this particular tip because I really am not going to burn at the tip. This gives me free access all along the base of the tool. You can also use a wood burning tool. When you go to clean this off, it's nice to have a wire brush available, and as stuff builds up, you can just wipe it off easily like that. Okay, so to start burning, we're going to take our applique, and we are very gently just going to rub it against the edge like that. When I first started playing with burning fabric, I did it the opposite. I held the tool in my hand and tried to direct it along leaves that were in fabric, and I'll tell you, this way you have a lot better control. Be sure to turn on your burning tool 10 to 15 minutes before you anticipate using it, because it's going to take that long to work up to full capacity. Once it's hot, do not, under any circumstances, let it touch any part of your body, because it will induce third-degree burns. View it as a very useful but potentially dangerous device. Allow yourself some time to experiment with burning other fabrics as well. It's pretty fun, and you'll see that synthetic fabrics melt, creating a really neat texture. These are some of the media I use to add colorful highlights to fabric. Today we'll be using colored pencils, and Prismacolor is the brand I've had the most success with so far. Okay, so now we're ready to begin adding some color to our applique. What I usually do is try to add a series of colors and kind of blend them. So I think on this green I like it. It's interesting with the variegated color, but I'm going to add in a little bit of some warm tones. So I guess I'm going to start with a little red, and I'm holding this really more at its side than with the point down, because I really don't want lines per se. And I know that when I go later on to do my free motion embroidery on this, that I'm going to be trying to stitch in a way that I almost am giving an illusion of kind of a branching pattern. I'm not going to be stitching vein lines, but that's kind of what your head's going to be thinking when you see the stitching. And the reason I'm pointing that out is I'm kind of coloring in those same kinds of directions, meaning I'm not going across. And notice this is very subtle. And when you do this, you're going to feel silly, like, oh gosh, why am I wasting my time? But when we're all done, you'll see this will really add some nice interest. It's very subtle, but it's very cool. You can do some blending with your fingers, and what we've done here is we have applied our colored pencils dry. You could have dipped them in water and applied them wet. After I finish the other one, you'll see we can go back and we'll add just a bit of water to blend these a little bit more subtly, and then we'll dry it before we actually fuse it. And I'm just taking a little bit of color into my stem as well. Remember, the stem is also going to go through some fall changes. Notice how the extreme edges of this where we have singed it are picking up some nice red tones in here too. And kind of in a general, as a general rule, when you add these colors, don't ever add just one. Even within one given color, add 2 or 3. And again, you're going to be surprised once we finally work this that these are very subtle highlights that we're adding. So don't be shy. They're not going to wreck your quilt. They're just going to kind of create a new level of very subtle interest. So now all I'm doing is I'm adding a very small amount of water. And all this will do is blend this a bit. Now this is still attached to the fusible web paper. And because of that, it is not going to blend as well as it would if it didn't have that paper. So you may want to remove the paper. I really leave that paper on right until I'm ready to fuse, just because it makes my piece easier to work with. This silk charmeuse that I'm using is very thin, and it's kind of a pain in the neck, frankly, unless it's attached to that release paper. I'm going to set this aside and we'll work on the other one. And again, you don't have to add this water step. This is totally optional. And what you might want to do is, as it's wet, go back in with a dry colored pencil and add some more highlights if you don't like what you're seeing. When this part is done, you need to wait for this to dry. You can speed it up with a hair dryer if you want. That's usually what I do. Usually I'm excited, I want to get moving on this thing, and I'm not willing to wait. Okay, so these are as blended as I feel like they need to be. We've prepared our applique shapes, and they're now ready to be fused to the background fabric. Tune in to part 2 to see how we can use free motion machine embroidery to add even more interest and texture to our ginkgo leaves.